I think I have the video recording happening, so fingers crossed, and we'll see how we go. But I appreciate that intro, John. I'm sort of blushing. I'm not sure if you can tell now. I'm blushing. But I mean, for me, the key here is that we are a community, and we're a vibrant, active community, and it's really great to be able to sit around and talk with a bunch of my peers about things that I'm passionate about. And for anyone who knows me, which is quite a few of you on the call, actually, it's a little bit great. It's really cool, actually. Coaching and coaching coaches and thinking about coaching and agile coaching is one of my passion projects. And one of the things that I have really encountered in my career is this challenge that we have with agile coaching. And the topic that I wanted to talk about today was the fact that coaching is not free-form poetry. And the whole free-form poetry thing comes from one of the guys that Shane and I and quite a few of us have worked with, actually, is a guy called James King, and he used to talk about agility not being free-form poetry. But I've sort of grabbed hold of that, and I've said, you know what, we really do need to think about coaching as being not free-form poetry. We need to think about coaching in a different paradigm. So I'm just going to share my screen with you so that you can see where we're going to go on our journey today. And I just want to make sure that you can see that screen. You can see all of the wonderful imagery that I've created for you. Can everyone see that? Coaching is not free-form poetry. Excellent. So just for the record, I am actually using Miro as my platform, so I can zoom in and zoom out. And what we're going to do over the next little while is feel free to interrupt and tell me what you think, so that we can have a good conversation. But I'm just going to start with this whole concept that coaching an agile team really does need to be the deliberate practice of the coaching craft. And I think this is very, very important for us to consider as agile coaches, because we are the exemplars of agility. So when we are coaching teams, we need to be able to be on the spot, constant demonstrators of agility, the mindset, the behaviours, and the practices. And it really made me think, when I started to think about these sort of concepts, that one of the things that I wanted to be able to do as a coach was demonstrate the behaviours, the practices, the tools, techniques associated with coaching to the teams that I was coaching. But I also wanted to be thinking about the application of agility in itself to coaching practice. Now, the reason I see this is often when I'm working with coaches, there is this tendency for them to coach the moment, coach what's happening right now, to jump into an event or a ceremony or to a situation and sort of say, no. And what I reflect on when I think about that is the fact that coaching is actually quite a long-term engagement. When you are engaging with the team as a coach, one of the things that you want to be thinking about is the long-term engagement of the coach with the team and a structured approach to your coaching, so that you're not confusing the heck out of everyone. So I thought, how best could we do this? What if we had a way of delivering value that allowed us to actually iterate through that value generation? And then I realized, of course, there is this thing, we call it agility. So I thought was, what if we actually followed coaching using an agile approach? So I just wanted to talk you through that, and I wanted you to think about that as we go. But does anyone have any questions so far? Alrighty, cool. So the first thing is when we're coaching, my recommendation, this is how I do it, and I've been doing it like this for a few years just so I can see what's going on. The first thing is, from a coaching perspective, we need to recognise we need to be aware of the whole of the system. So before we can even start to coach a team, before we can even start to be coaching even an individual, we need to understand the context in which the team is working. And this is very, very important, because getting involved with the team and trying to sharpen up their skills around retrospectives or around backlog refinement activities is not going to work unless the way the work is coming into the backlog is understood and in a good shape. You can't basically make something out of nothing. So when you are thinking about your coaching, the first thing that you need to do is step back, get up on that balcony and take that big picture view and start to think about what context is the team working in. This is very important, because when you're a coach, you really do have to prioritize the time and energy that you're expending with the team to make sure that it is good value. You don't want to be setting your teams up for failure. You don't want to be trying to get them to do things that they're never going to be able to do. As well as looking at the context and the situation, the other thing that we need to be very aware of is what is the need of the organisation. And this is something that we often don't sit back and reflect on. And you can find that in some situations, the need of the organisation is very different to the need of the Agile coach, which is very different to the need of the team. So when we start to think about coaching, not only do we have to have that system or context view, but we really do need to consider what are the needs of the stakeholders in the organisation. Because coaching a team to start to work in a different style, a different cadence, a different approach to the fundamentals, the values or the principles of the organisation, again, it's going to be doomed. You're setting everyone up for failure. So you need to be aware of that. Then the final thing to be aware of from the coach is the alignment of the team that you are coaching to other teams. Who are they receiving things from? Who are they giving things from? What's the maturity model of those other teams? How do they work together? Where are those handoff points? What are all of the other elements that we need to be aware of when the team that we're coaching is interacting within the system? So not only do we need to be thinking about the bigger picture of the system, we need to be thinking about the interactions of the system. And when you start to get into coaching at scale, this is where you start to think about what are the governance models, what are the reporting lines, what are the release cadences, all of those things which are, not real sexy and not the fun bits of agility, but they need to be built into how you're coaching the team. Because if you're not thinking about those things, again, the team is not going to be able to grab hold of what you're trying to do and put it into practice, because it's out of context and it's something that is just going to be hard for them to do. So that's the first thing. From an Agile perspective and a coaching perspective, it's not just jump into a team and say, "G'day, I'm Sharon, I'm here to coach you, let's go." It's actually taking that step back and being aware of the situation of the team. Then, when you engage with the team, I'll stop there. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, feedback?
Hi, my feedback is fantastic, just right. And I'm doing this journey here with the government in NT, and I just found out how important it is to understand where these guys are and the maturity of the whole thing. Thank you to highlight that. Brilliant.
Thank you. I'm glad that it resonates. Anyone else?
How do you make sure you get the truth?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's super hard because, what is the truth? Everything that I see goes through the Sharon filter. But it is about just taking the time, having the conversations, reaching out to the stakeholders, looking around and just seeing what's going on. It's that be aware.
I think it ties into diversity, like getting different people, different backgrounds, and helping them build that picture for you. So there's different perspectives of I'll say it's close to the truth.
Yeah, multiple sources will give you the truth.
100%. But the other thing to think about, and sadly this is often a thing that we have, is we can work with organisations that they hire us and they say, come on in and be our Agile coach. But we start to be coaching the concepts and the mindset and the behaviours around agility, and we start to hit ceilings or we hit barriers. We start to talk about quarterly funding and they say, no, that can never happen. We start to talk about adaptive planning and we get the pushback, no, that can never happen. And this is a really important thing when you're being an Agile coach, because you can't be selling the team the dream if the organisation isn't ready for that dream. So you've got to adjust the agility that you are focusing on. Now, it may mean that even as an Agile coach, you actually say, you know what, I can work with your teams, your delivery teams, but I actually need to talk to your leadership. I need to talk about governance. We need to talk about the operating model. But that's the first thing, is to be aware of the context in which you're coaching. And this coaching context also thinks about, the maturity of the team, the newness of the team. Where is the team at in its cycle of life? But once you've done that, the next thing that I always pay attention to is to think about the Agile life cycle. Now, if we step back and look at the Agile life cycle that I've drawn on the screen here, we've got 4 key phases in the Agile life cycle that I like to refer to. They probably won't be the same language you use, but what I would like you to do is just work with me on this language. The first one is concept mode, and when we're delivering value through an Agile process, that's about alignment around validating the idea is correct and fit for purpose for the organisation and matching back to our strategy. It's about making sure that we've got the right people in the room to have the right conversations. And it's also about understanding what success looks like. So that's what concept mode is about. Initiate mode is often known as the planning mode, and in initiate mode we decompose the work and we break it down and we start to do some planning and risk analysis and we start to think about who are we going to need to do what and when. Execute mode is when we move into our iterative mode, where we're starting to turn the theory into reality and we're maximising our learning. And the fourth mode that I talk about is the learn and adjust mode. And learn and adjust is where we take the feedback from each of the stages and each of the events and activities, and we think about, are we on track? Are we doing the right thing? So that's a broad brush Agile approach to delivery. But what I do is I take it and I apply it to my coaching. And my thoughts now is I'm just going to step through how this applies to coaching so you can see how I've mapped these concepts to coaching as a thing. So the first thing, that when you're in concept mode, this is when you're engaging with the team and you're engaging with the key stakeholders, and you actually need to have some really good, solid conversations. And you need to talk about, what are the coaching targets? What are we here to achieve? And we need to validate that they are actually achievable targets. You need to validate, have we got the right conditions for that particular type of outcome? And then you need to form your coaching agreements. So this is where you sit down and you nut out how you are going to work together, how you are going to know that you're on the right track, what sort of feedback loops you're going to put in place, all of those things. Now, your coaching agreement is also very, very important when you're coaching a team, because the team has to want to be coached. If the team isn't open to be coaching, it's going to be a very, very challenging environment that you're working in, and you arguably can't coach someone who doesn't want to be coached. And this is a really important thing for an Agile coach, to be very aware that you can't make people be Agile. You can't do it. So the concept mode is about identifying, what are we going to be doing and how do we think we're going to be doing it and what do we think it's going to look like. Now, this is super important to make sure that everyone is sort of on the same page, roughly on the same page. Yeah, we're up for coaching. Yeah, we're up to be coached, and this is what we think it's going to look like. But also identifying the targets is really important. Oftentimes we don't realise that agility is a constant journey. And people think if we grab a coach and we bring them on board, we can get instantly agile. We all know that's not true. So doing this sort of conversation session really does help set those expectations. The next stage is, go. Yeah.
How do you tell the manager who is, or the leader who, without a genuine concern, is make those people agile and the team doesn't want to?
Well, that's a great question, Shane, because that's where you have to identify that you've got a fundamental mismatch. You do not have an alignment there. And if the team is saying no, there is no way that the coach can do that. Not even maybe, because the coach occupies a very, very special position in the team, where the coach has absolutely no authority. Coach is standing outside of any sort of hierarchy, any sort of chain of command. So the role of the coach is to influence without authority. Now, if the person with authority can't influence the team in the direction that they want the team to go, there's no way the coach can. The other thing is, and this is a really good thing, one of the key elements around coaching is you are separate. You are not part of the chain of command. There is no rank associated with coaching. So you can't sort of jump into this role as the boss. And it's one of the first anti-patterns that I see when teams start reporting to the coach. You know that you're like, oh gosh, that's not going the direction that I want to go. Does that answer that question, Shane?
Yes, thank you.
Now, this is something that we often skip. You know, we're onboarded, you're an Agile coach, go. But I would really recommend that when you're engaging with your team, you do actually sit down and you have this conversation. Otherwise, you can find out you've got these mammoth disconnects and you're going to end up with very unhappy people and unmet expectations. So once you've done your concept, the next thing is plan the coaching. What is she talking about? I'm talking about exactly the same stuff we would do in initiate mode in any sort of agile delivery lifecycle. Sit down and say, okay, what are our key milestones? What are the objectives that we're trying to achieve? And then even better, how will we know we've achieved them? What does success look like? End of the journey, what are we going to track along the journey to see if we're on the right track? And metrics are not an anti-pattern here. They won't be your traditional progress metrics or quality metrics, but you need to be thinking about, there's a myriad of agility, maturity assessment metrics that you can use. It can be as simple as, we get people who are dialing into sessions and turning their cameras on. That's the type of metric that we can start to track. A couple of the metrics that I often use when I'm doing coaching and transformations at scale is I talk about the volume on the floor. Back in the olden days when we used to be physically co-located or in the same place. But the volume of conversation, the amount of collaboration is for me one of the key metrics that I like to track. And you can still track it when you're working remotely or working online. It's just, how engaging are people? The other metric that I always like to track as well is the attendance rates. How people's behaviour changes over time when you've created this really strongly collaborative environment is you find that people are dialing in early to sessions and they're hanging around at the end. They're not seeking to escape. They actually want to engage. So there are a couple of the more qualitative metrics that I use when I'm tracking agility, as well as, the process improvement metrics that you can always start to track as well. The other thing that I always like to do in Initiate is talk about the priorities. What are the attributes around the team that we want to focus on? And this comes back to this whole concept about agility being not just a set of practices. There's a bunch of values and a bunch of principles. And I really like to abstract agility to those values and principles before I start to talk about practices. Anyone can learn how to do a retro. I'm not underselling retros, but anyone can read the script. Most of the practices have scripts attached to them deliberately so that we just run through them. As a coach, the key thing is to look at the impact and the value created by the practices, and then to narrow into the behaviours that we are looking to modify or enhance. What are the principles that we need to focus on? So to do this, I always just go back to ground zero. I go to the 12 principles from agility and I say, what are the things that we want to be focusing on? Is it about working as a team? Is it about feedback loops? Is it about adjusting and learning over time? And just have that conversation. Now, that is super important for me when I'm doing my coaching, because once I understand what the priorities are, it means that I can think about how can I break the approach that I'm going to take with the team into consumable increments. In some worlds, we'll call them stories, but for me, I just call them coaching activities. So I need to really think about that. And I need to think about, how is the team working? So, for example, if someone said to me, I need you to coach the team is not great in writing stories. I say, okay, so story writing, there's a template for that. What about writing stories is not working? If collaboration is the problem, then collaboration is the coaching target, not story writing. If it is silos, because the team says that the BA's job to write stories, my job is to just execute the stories, then we're going to talk about empowerment and ownership of the solution. Now, that's two very different topics. So as a coach, I really need to figure out what are the priorities for change, and then what am I going to do to help make those changes. So I'm effectively going to create a release plan. Now, in my release plan, I'm going to think about how long have I got to actually execute the coaching. Now, when we do this for a delivery team, we probably will do a quarterly release plan, and we're going to break the release plan into the number of iterations that we've got per release. Now, in this case, I'm saying, for example, we're working in a 2-week iteration. So if we're going to be doing a quarterly release plan, we've got 6 iterations. So that gives me as a coach 6 work cycles in which to think about where am I going to engage, when am I going to engage, and how am I going to engage to move the dial on this particular target that we have. Now, when I do that, I'm going to be thinking very hard. And I want to be thinking hard about this because I need to make sure that I understand the theme, the big picture theme for the change that we're trying to emerge from within the team. Now, this is coaching because coaches don't make anyone do anything. Coaches emerge behaviour. So when we start to think about the emergent behaviour that we are trying to surface, we really need to understand where are our best engagement points. To do that, you look at the way the team is working and you sit down and you say, what are the right ceremonies or the right sessions for me to jump in and be engaged with them? But also, what stance do I need to use when I'm engaging with them? Now, this stance is very important. We all know that the ultimate goal of any agile coach is to make themselves redundant. So to do that, I need to make sure that I'm very much modifying my stance over time so the team does not become dependent on me to be setting directions and standards. So over the duration of the engagement with the team, I actually need to make sure that they are taking the ownership of the outcome. It can't all be only happening whenever Sharon's in the room. So I've got to be thinking about that, as well as my coaching stance. So when I talk about my coaching stance, I'm going to go down to ground zero here. And this is the Agile Coaching Competency Framework. And this comes from Lisa Atkins. So if anyone's not seen it, go and look at it and pay attention to it. Because this is where we actually start to see the 4 key coaching stances that I talk about when I'm thinking about the coaching engagement that I'm going to do. So teaching, mentoring, professional coaching, and facilitating. They're the coaching stances that I like to be thinking about. And so when I'm working with the team and I'm starting to think about the outcomes that we're trying to deliver, and I'm starting to think about which engagement I'm going to have in iteration 1, I'm also thinking, am I engaging as a teacher? Am I engaging as a facilitator? Am I engaging as a coach? Or am I going to work with someone from a mentoring stance? Now, choosing that stance deliberately means to me that I monitor myself. I pay attention to myself. Sorry, was that a question? No? So I'm paying attention to myself as a coach. You know, you've got to be self-aware when you're a coach. So if I've decided I'm going to be in teaching mode, that means that for any session that I'm engaging with the team with, I better have some facts and figures prepared. And I need to think very carefully about what is the message that I'm trying to send. And I need to structure the message in such a way that it's consumable to the team. But also reflecting that it's teaching, it's knowledge, acquisition that the team is doing, not application, not practicing, it's acquisition. Because then I need to step away and let them practice it. I cannot then stand over them and say, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. I actually have to transfer the knowledge, then step back and be there to support them, not criticize them every time they practice it. So we've got to create the space for the knowledge application after the knowledge acquisition has occurred. If I'm going to be the facilitator, I've got to be very conscious again to this mindset that ultimately the team needs to do this stuff even if I'm not there. And it's one of my maturity assessments for a team. It's like if I'm running stand-ups because we're early in our agile life cycle and no one knows how to run a stand-up and I'm running the stand-ups, if I'm away, do they still happen? If the answer is no, then I'm actually building myself into the process and I need to build myself out. And I need to be thinking about how can I start to hand the facilitation over. The other thing that I do when I'm thinking like this and I'm planning, I do try to look at the bigger picture and segue over time. So if it's a brand new team with very little agile maturity, very little agile knowledge, I'll probably go quite heavy on the training early and then seek to lighten up as we go. I'm also going to pay attention to expected outcomes because I need to know what do I expect as a coach from any engagement that I have with the team. I need to be thinking about how will I know that they've got it? How will I know that we can move to the next topic? How will I know that the story is done? And then I've got to check that. I can't just assume it. Questions, comments, thoughts?
So what quick question? So you go first.
Change agents in the team. Have you, I always feel like I need to, as a coach, identify my change agents in the team, really help. If they're on my side, they can really embed as well when I'm not there.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And you really want to be thinking about how can you mobilize them, but being very careful not to turn them into the de facto coach.
Yeah, 100%.
So I was thinking, I really like the approach of looking at and coaching engagement in the same way that you would look at an agile engagement in general. And I think the one thing for me that's key there would be looking at the whole model being one that's focused on responding to change instead of really focused on what is it that you're going to be doing at each moment in time and saying, this is your sort of Gantt chart for how you're going to be doing your coaching.
100%.
I was thinking in terms of that from an iteration point of view, wouldn't the retrospective be the equivalent of your sprint planning and your sprint review if you're using Scrum? So it will be the coach's sprint planning and sprint review session.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great feedback loop. And if you're stepping that degree away where you're able to observe the team as they're executing the retro and think about, are they doing it themselves? Are they actually getting value out of the retro? Is everyone engaging? And if you're able to target the key behaviours that you want to see in a retro, observing as the coach from that degree removed, you can use that very much to assess, are you on track with your coaching goals? Because what you may find is you're not. So you may actually have to go back to your initiate and say, I thought that was going to work. It's not going to work.
I think in the chat someone brought up an interesting question. I've come across it as well. And recent examples, like I'm in a lot of Teams chats, like group chats, and the iteration manager was away. So I saw the team go, hey, we'll do the retro tomorrow when she's back. And I'm like, come on, like, I'm pretty sure she gave one of you guys do it. At that point in time, I just didn't know if I should have interjected and go and corralled them or not, because there's so much happening at the time. It's like, should I wait for the iteration manager to come back and go, hey guys, why didn't you do this? Or should I, as a coach, jump in and go, why are you not doing this? It feels like rocky from both sides.
So, okay, let's think about that. As a coach, how else could you have approached it so it emerged from the team? What do we think? We've got a great group of people on this call. What else could we have done there, do you think?
I want to segue into the question that I had, and I think it might help. You made a point about the different stances that the coach can step in and out of. How transparent are you about the stance you are in at the moment with the team?
100%. 100%. And no stealth coaching. And if it's a teaching session, it's like, guys, here's some facts, learn the facts. Yeah. Very, 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 very transparent around that. But back to that example, one of the things that I'm super careful of is, as the coach, I'm not the de facto boss. I'm not the de facto scrum master. I'm not the de facto manager. So, in the example that you shared there, I wouldn't have said, come on guys, let's do it. I wouldn't have corralled them. I probably would have asked.
I feel like it's just going to the iteration meeting and go, hey, how do you feel about this when they got back? One-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Needing my support and backing you up and going, hey guys, like, you let me down and did continue on without me.
Yeah, or just a gentle question to the team at the time, holding it lightly with curiosity.
What's stopping us?
I like that.
What's stopping us from doing the retro, even though Scrum Master is
that's
away?
my question.
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? What's stopping us?
What if?
Sorry?
What if?
What if?
Yeah, curiosity. What if?
What if? Yeah. Now, the other thing that I always like to be thinking of, so I'm just going to pop up here, is we'd all be reasonably familiar with Cynefin. Now, the thing to realise with Cynefin is when we are coaching, I find myself often on the left-hand side of the Cynefin model over here, where cause and effect relationship have a very, very loose coupling. And most of the time, the cause and effect relationship is only visible in hindsight. So this is why I like to create a coaching roadmap, and I like to review it regularly. And I also like to see whether or not I am actually in complex quadrant, or actually am I like, seriously, there is no cause and effect relationship, that pattern is not emerging for me. I need to figure out what's going on by doing a series of experiments. Now, if I'm going to do that, that means that I need to think about each experiment, the result of each of the experiments, and what is that going to tell me about the next experiment. Now, this is just thinking, and we use Cynefin when we're working with Agile delivery a lot, or I do. But so as a coach, I know that when you're dealing with human dynamics, that oftentimes the cause and effect relationship will take a long time to uncover. And if we've got very, very, very difficult to see cause and effect relationships happening, then I'm probably going to need to take longer on my coaching, which means that I need to create a longer plan, and I need to be very intentional about the experiments that I run, so that I'm actually running the right experiment to give me the right information to help me make my choices. It's all part of my execution activities. The other thing that I'm very conscious of, coming from a science background myself, is you can't run too many experiments at a time. So when I'm starting to look at the team and what the theme is for each iteration, I actually start to think about, can I run one, maybe two experiments in this iteration? Because I need to make sure that I'm not overwhelming the team. The other thing that I think about a lot when I'm looking at this and when I'm thinking about the coaching is, I used to coach hockey. So I used to do a lot of hockey coaching, and I used to coach some really good players. And we were at that end of the coaching spectrum that I would often work with people, and I'd say, listen, I need you to change your grip on the stick. And they would say, oh, but I've been holding my stick like this for forever. And I'm like, yeah, but we can increase your power if you do this. But I always recognise that I can't just get someone to change from having a vertical thumb to wrapping their thumb around the stick. I can't just do that, because that's actually going to hurt them. If we go from current state to future state instantly, I'm not taking any consideration into the muscle structures that they have, how they use their shoulder, where the power drive comes from. So if I'm going to get people to change a fundamental skill like that, I actually need to decompose the skill, understand what are the key muscle groups, train those muscle groups before we make this change. And so when I'm starting to work with a team, for example, if they wanted to shift from using requirement specs to having a product backlog with stories, you can't do it in one iteration. It's going to take time to sharpen up the various muscles until we get to the stage of having backlogs with stories in them. So part of the coaching ability is to see the target state, to understand what changes we need to make, identify the key muscle groups. But then even better, you need to create what I call the basic drills. What are the things that happen to everyone always, every time? So, as I said, I used to be a hockey coach, but I also used to be a hockey player. And I know, and anyone who's done any sort of sports will know, that the first thing the coach does when you get to the session is you got to do 3 laps around the oval. Now, that's not just what coaches mean. Basically, it's about getting your head into the right headspace. It's about getting your basic level of fitness up, but it's also about teamwork. We all do this. But after you've done your laps around the oval, the coach then breaks you into your component parts of the team. So again, back to hockey, but the same applies to football, whatever code you play. You tend to have the forwards and the backs. And the coach will talk about the game from the concept of the forwards and the concept of the backs, and then the concept of the team and how we're going to work together. So as a coach, you need to be thinking about those key skills. Muscle group breakdown, what are the basic drills? And then what are the specialist drills that you need for each of the parts of the team? Now, this requires that you pay a lot of attention. You really need to be thinking about the change that you want to make, or you want to emerge, and how you can have these different conversations, these different sessions, these different coaching stances with different parts of the team. What does that feel like to people?
I think it's being careful not being too theoretical as well. Like they really need to understand like the relatability to what they're doing right now.
Absolutely.
There's something about, as you say, warming people up to, sorry, my microphone doesn't work particularly well. There's something about warming people up to the coaching situation, but also to a particular session of work, etc. And if you've got a ritual, whether it be a run around the oval or whatever's working for that team, that's always going to be helpful. It's also really helpful in coaching of giving people that, okay, so what's the process you have when you're coaching somebody? It just gets them in the right headspace.
Very much. Very much. And it's all headspace stuff. All right. So when we look at this, there's a few things that I always like to be thinking about and talking to people about. I always like to consider coaching the season, not the game or the play. So what this means is when I'm working with a team and we're in the middle of a session, we're doing story elaboration and something goes a bit squirrely, do I jump in or not? And if I'm thinking about coaching the play, I may jump in. I may say, hey, come on, maybe we can look at it in a different way. Have you considered, all the good coaching approaches? But if I'm coaching the season, I know that my role as a coach is to help people discover anti-patterns and how to deal with them themselves. So what I need to do is I actually need to step back and adopt the role of a coach, not the player of the game. And I need to be thinking about the big picture, long-term thing. If I always jump in and solve the problems for the team, they are not going to learn how to solve the problems themselves. The other thing that I like to think about is I make sure that I think about all of the players on the team, not just the engaged ones, not just the change agents, like you mentioned. You often find that there's different dynamics in the relationship with a coach. So you really do need to make sure that you are engaging all of the players, not in the same way. Everyone needs a different type of engagement. But I also make sure that when I'm coaching a team, I consider the players not on the team. So what are people going to be thinking and saying? What feedback are people going to get? What is the team going to get from their peers, from their adjacent teams, from their leaders? So I think about all of those things, and they're the intent that I engage with when I'm working with the teams. So what does that look like? Well, surprisingly, it looks suspiciously like this. Paying attention to the context, thinking about what are we trying to achieve and how could we achieve it? What are the feedback loops that I'm going to have and how will I know where I'm on track? Being aware that I'm going to have to change my plan as we go, and also being aware that it's very, very important that everyone knows everything about your coaching journey. no stealth coaching. And that's how we end up with success. That's my message.
Should you go a bit further what you mean by no self-coaching?
Stealth coaching.
Stealth. Oh, okay, stealth. Sorry, I mean self-coaching. Huh?
No, stealth coaching.
Yeah.
I made the same mistake, Rachel. So you're in good company.
It was probably me then.
I think part of it's like the audio online whenever you're hearing stuff, you don't pick up those small nuances in our fantastic English language.
Darren, what happens when you set this coaching path for teams and you're like, a couple of iterations in, everyone's on the path, and then everyone's like, I don't know, not improving, not going along anymore, not, disengaging with the path that they set.
So this is my path. So this is my coaching plan. I'll share it with the team, and I'll share it, with anyone who wants to talk to me about it. But if it's not working, I've probably chosen the wrong approach. I probably need to stop and think and pay attention to the feedback that I'm getting from the team. And I may have to change my stance. I may have to change my engagement model. I may have to think, am I trying to do too much? Am I, getting in the way of the team? So no change from the team is a very powerful indicator that the coaching isn't delivering value.
It's a really powerful way of looking at things.
Yeah, so that no stealth in there. Do you have those conversations with them? Like, I noticed, I've tried these tactics, I've tried this, and I'm noticing that it's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. Because right at the beginning, we would have sat down and we would have said, what am I here to do? How am I here to help? Here's how I think I'm going to do it. Does that work with you guys? And if they said yes and I said yes, and then we start to do it and it's not working, we've learned something. So I would absolutely come back to the learn and adjust stage and say, okay, listen, we've learned something. Do we need to change our targets or our agreements? Do we need to change the plan? Do I need to change my stance? What's the gap? So I've
all the outside influence that's not allowing the team.
Well, and that means that I need to change. What are we trying to deliver? Because I can't set the team up for failure.
So, Sharon, you mentioned doing some experimentation.
Yep.
Do you have any examples of experiments that you've run, and perhaps ones that have worked and ones that haven't?
Oh, that's a great question. I have thousands that didn't. Thousands upon thousands. Because, I could tell you about the time I got banned from a whole floor of an organisation. That was a very bad experiment. But let me think about success. So one of the experiments that I usually run is in facilitation mode. So I say to the team, tell you what, with facilitation here's what I would recommend. See one, share one, do one. I will show you one, and I'll break it down into all its bits. How do you run a session? How do you do a particular thing? What is the thinking style? What are your decision points? See one and watch me do one, right? Share one. I will be with you and we will do one together, and we'll work our way through the run sheet, and we'll work our way through the events and activities, and we can pair about it so you can do stuff without having to carry the whole load. Then the third stage is do one. You do it. I'll hand it over to someone, but I'll be there. Not to judge, but as a safety net. So if things fall apart, I can jump in and help, but only if they're really, really falling apart. So that's the type of approach that I take when I talk about facilitating an agile ceremony, like a retro or a showcase or anything. See one, share one, do one. And the whole point there is after they've done the do one, I can start to step further and further away because they know how to do it. I'm always there, but I'm just that little bit more removed, and they start to trust themselves. Now, the experiment is the share one or the do one could go very wrong. If that happens, I need to be prepared as a coach to work with the person who is taking over the facilitating so that they can understand what went wrong and why. Because most facilitation challenges come from not the facilitator. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I've got a follow-on question as well.
Yep.
Is what do you do in a situation when you were speaking about the right at the beginning of concepts, identifying the targets and coaching agreements and that sort of thing? So what do you do in that situation that was described a little bit earlier, where you go in and you find maybe that the boss of the department has said, that they were told by their manager that they need to become more agile, so they got an agile coach to do it with the team.
Yeah.
And then you come in and when you start engaging with the people in the team, they say, look, we've tried this before, it didn't work. We just believe that we should be getting on with doing the thing. So what do you walk away from something like that, or do you sort of jump in and is there anything you can do in that situation that you would recommend as a kind of an initial approach?
That's a great question, John, and there's so many it depends bits to it. So the first one is how much do you need the money? So my approach there would be to say, thank you very much for sharing that with me to the team, and then I would go and talk to the manager. All right, so gather my courage and go and say to the manager, so thank you very much for the job, madam. You've hired me. I love this coaching, blah, 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 but it's never going to work, and here's why. And to see what the receptiveness to that information would be. And then maybe think about identifying a different coaching path, maybe not for the team, maybe for the leaders or something like that. But that's often a career limiting move. So it really, again, it depends on how badly you need the job. You do need to have the courage to surface that, though, because as a coach, you have this duty of care, and Shane's on the call, so I'll say the word ethics, and then Shane will blah about ethics because it's just fabulous. But as a coach, you do have a duty of care, and as a coach, ethically, you cannot agree if you can't do it. Shane, your thoughts?
Absolutely. That transparency, that invitation, not imposition. And an invitation can be refused.
I think there's the opposite end of that as well, is where people think my language here, but they're hot shit. They think that they're doing really well, but it's actually rose-colored glasses are on. And how have you dealt with those situations in coaching teams? Agile journey?
That breaks my heart when I see it happen. It's just such a trigger for me. The coach should not be the smartest person in the room. And what I see happening in so many organizations is people see agile coaching as a career step. Like, I'll go from tech lead to scrum master to coach to something else. And it's like, coaching isn't a career step. It's very hard work. And the whole point of a coach is to make yourself redundant. You need to get more and more invisible to the team. That's how you know you're doing a good job. If you're coaching for ego, if you're coaching because you know the most about something, you're not actually coaching, because the object of the exercise is to surface the knowledge from the team. Does that answer that question?
I think it's like when the team has ego and they think they're too good.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, from the other perspective. That is, I guess, you've got to ask yourself as a coach, are they good enough? If they are delivering value, if they are working well together, if they are not breaking each other, and if they're not breaking the solution, are they good enough? Now, this is why I like metrics, because I use metrics as mirrors, not weapons. So when we start to talk about in the initiate mode, what are our milestones and objectives, I always like to work with the team. So this is never done alone. This is always done with the team because, I'm demonstrating agility by doing these things. And we say, okay, what metrics are we going to get? How are we going to check that we're agile? And we gather those metrics and then we review them, regularly. Are we on track? What do we need to change? Are these the right metrics? So the best thing about metrics defined up front and then continuously evaluated is, you may think that you're a top delivery team, but if the metrics don't play it out, you can sort of adopt the thinking pose as a coach and say, what do we reckon these metrics tell us? Does that help?
So how do you build the trust?
Trust. Trust is a thing. It takes time, but to be trustworthy, you make a commitment and you keep it. You're visible. You're transparent. You're authentic and sincere. You come from a good place, not using the team for any reason. Integrity, ethics. You're really obvious about those things as well. You're vulnerable. If you make a mistake, you say, guys, I really blew that. I'm sorry.
So how important is it to have the trust of the team as a coach?
Vital. Very, very important. If they don't trust you,
deliver anything.
Yeah. They're just gonna do lip service. What's your
metrics?
Sorry?
What's your metric for that?
For trust? To see whether or not they're doing lip service. So one of the things I always pay attention to is when people are talking directly to me or we're talking about an agility concept in some sort of coaching session, do they only say it if I'm in the room? Do they live it if I'm not there? That's what I look for, right? So, do they just smile politely at my face and then ignore me when I'm not there? Now, what that means is there is no trust relationship, and it means that they're probably, struggling to engage with me. Not their fault, my fault. And that means that I really need to pay attention to how I'm behaving and what I'm saying and what I'm doing.
Yeah, thanks.
Sharon, if I may.
You may, Shane.
I love the model. And I yearn for a very clear exit at the end as the coach.
Well, have you done enough? Have you met your goals? Has your agreement been satisfied? That would always be my exit strategy. Have we delivered the value?
You've made the point a number of times that as a coach, you are working yourself redundant.
Yep.
And I'd just love to see on that model leave.
So are you saying that I should turn this guy into someone who's walking down the track?
Yep.
Great idea. Great idea.
I think it's interesting that we talk about that because over time, culture, organisation can change without those strong people and engaged people in those places really holding that. And it's not the coach's job to be holding that either. It's everyone else.
Yep. And so that to me would indicate something has gone squirrely in the coaching approach. That if you're the glue, if I'm the glue holding the team together, then
one of the things we put into the code of ethics was deliberately avoiding creating dependencies.
So anyway,
So you go.
in accepting a job as a coach, agile coach, is there any way to know before something happens that, for example, the managers want the coach, but the team doesn't think that they need a coach?
not unless you have the opportunity during the interview stage to say, can I talk to the team? Can I discuss agility with the team? Can I engage with the team and, just have a bit of a trial session? That would be
There
the
are
only
not
way.
any red flags that at that stage can understand.
Oh, yeah, there'd be, almost all red flags. That's why they have asked for a coach. So, but when you being asked to come on board and make the team instantly agile, to go from 0 to 60 in 30 days, or to take agility out of a box, they're the red flags that I have. You're talking about behavioural change. It's not just about can you execute a stand-up. It's about can you complete a stand-up that adds value consistently and repeatably in a safe environment for the team. So, even that sentence, there's so many things in that sentence.
People are talking to each other instead of the Scrum Master as a status report.
Exactly.
Sharon, hi, my name is Joanita. I haven't introduced myself yet. Fantastic session, and thank you so much for presenting this. I find this very, very, very valuable.
Good.
And it's something I can definitely use in my everyday work. Just how often, it's just something that I thought about. Once you leave, you've made yourself redundant. Once you leave that organization, how often do those bad habits, creep back in? And it's something that you'll need to revisit again, because it can go really well for a short amount of time, or even for a long amount of time. But bad habits die hard, sometimes. So they can, once that coaching aspect of it is completely gone, and you've left it thinking, yeah, we're okay. But looking back over a period of time, it might be that, those bad habits have crept back into the team. What do you do in that case? Would you revisit that organization, or is there anything that you can leave those teams with to kind of prompt those, behaviours as not a go-to again?
100%. Now, so firstly, do I go back to the team? Not unless people are paying me, because, hey, I'm a professional. I'm not going to wander into any team environment without permission and or some sort of contractual engagement happening there. I do coaching pro bono. I do that, but that's a different engagement. I never coach a team without the team being consensual and they're in an agreement for coaching. So it's never ad hoc. That's never what I do. The second thing is the whole point of the coaching journey is to enable the team to become self-aware and focus on continuous improvement themselves. So when we start to think about agility, if you are focusing on the agility concepts, one of them is you have to help the team learn and empower them to continuously reflect and adjust. So it's not you, it's them. John.
Hey everyone, I was just looking at the time.
Yeah, I know we've gone way over.
We've gone a bit over. I think that obviously, if you're able to stay a little bit longer, we can answer a couple more questions. But I think it's probably a good time to finish the formal part of the meeting. And if people are needing to run off and grab their dinners and all that sort of thing, I just wanted to really thank everyone for coming in and sharing with us today. And also a really big thanks to Sharon. It's a really amazing talk. I think, I've personally gained a lot out of it. And from the comments, what I'm hearing is that a lot of other people have gained a lot out of today as well. So thank you so much, and really looking forward to having more sessions with you in the future.
It's my pleasure to work with you. Thank you so much for everyone being engaged. I've also got a PDF version of that slide if anyone wants it, so I can share that with the meetup. I'll just what's the best way to do that, John?
Awesome.
And I can send it to everyone as RSVP if you want, or so that you get it in your inbox, or I can post it on the meetup site.
I can probably put it into the chat, but I don't. Yeah, why don't we just put it on the meetup site?
Whichever works for you.
Okay. Well, I'll send it through. Sorry?
Well, we have Susan here.
Yes, I just wasn't on screen before, that was all.
Yeah.
Hey, Susan, long time no see.
I know. I love when you're in full flow, Sharon. I love it.
So yeah, I'll post that material online so everyone can have it, and I hope that my video worked. But John, like you said, I'm happy to stay and talk and answer any questions that anyone has, but also I understand that it's Thursday night and it's late and you've all been working hard all week, so feel free to go forth and be with your families, significant others.
Thanks, Sharon. It was a great session, thought-provoking and informative, so thank you. And thanks, John, for hosting.
Thanks, Joe.
No worries. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Sharon, Bina, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
So good to see so many people I know too online.
It was fabulous, wasn't it?
I haven't been
It was.
I went for a while.
No. And it's good online. It's good online. That's why I couldn't make yours the other day, Sharon. What was it, Women in Agile?
Yeah.
It's so hard to come into town from where I am for face to face.
Yeah.
I ended up busy with like a skin appointment. I was like, oh, okay.
You have a new group, Women in Agile.
It's not new, but it's a meetup.
Is it? Oh, I'm not so sure then. So I didn't know about that one.
Oh, it's a great group.
Yeah, Women in Agile started about 5 years ago. I started it with Elaborate, actually, about 5 years ago. And then when I stepped out of Agile, Renee, my partner, Renee Craven, Renee took it over and set it up as the formal meetup, because it used to be a LinkedIn group. And we used to do face-to-face. Yeah.
I think they do like it's not monthly. I think it's
every 6 weeks, I think, is what Renee tries to aim at. Yeah.
I'll look it up. Because I've been to a lot of the Elaborate lunch and learn, and after work things, when it was face-to-face. But yeah, no, I never came across the Women in Agile. Interesting. I would look now.
You should definitely go to Rachel's Lean Coffee, the Elaborate Lean Coffee next Friday. If you're in town if you want face to face, that's a good one.
Yeah, no, I'm on the Gold Coast predominantly. I only go to Brisbane occasionally. So a lean coffee probably wouldn't get me there, but definitely a meet up on the subject.
No, I don't know, Cheryl, you've not been to our lean coffees. They're good.
And I love a big coffee.